So now we're going to start learning about the package text template from the standard library. And we're going to begin our exploration and the next step in our learning about templates by reflecting back upon the code in that previous example in 003. And there's a lot of issues with this code, right? Like one of the issues is that it's all in package main and it's all in func main. So we'd want to do something to abstract that code and make it more reusable. And one of the ways that we could do that is we could take all of this text right here and we could put it somewhere else. We could get it out of main. And so the best way to do this would be to have all of our HTML files as files and then to somehow be able to bring them into our program and use them. And so that's exactly what we're going to do in this next example. And we're going to start learning about the functions in the text template package from the standard library. We're going to start learning about the functions in text template to be able to bring files into our program and use them. And that's called parsing a file. So we'll have a bunch of files and we'll be able to parse them and then bring them into our program and use them. And we're going to start out with just one file. So here I have a file, tpl.gohtml, and that's where all that text is. I'm not going to merge data with it yet because we're just going to learn this one step at a time. But here, so the first step is to be able to, abstract our code, be able to bring the text of the files that we want out into separate files, and then bring those into our program and use them by parsing them. And so that's the first step, is to abstract it, get that text into its own file, and bring them into our program and use them. We're not going to merge data in yet. We will do that very soon. All right. So here I have tpl.gohtml, and you can see the extension .gohtml. So that's the customary extension used with Go programming, but this is not like PHP or ASP or Cold Fusion, CFM, if you go back far enough, right? It's not like you have to have that file extension because these are just files, and we're going to tell our program to, hey, go get those files and bring them in. So we could name these files anything we want, right? I could call this the Great Northwest as an extension, or I could call it GMA for grandma, or I could call it PHP if I wanted, or I could call it PHP, ASP, CFM. Whatever extension I wanted to call it, I could call it. But the customary traditional extension for Go programming is GoHTML. And when we serve our files, we'll be serving them from we'll be serving them in a RESTful way. And so the file extension is not going to matter. And it's just code within our program that our program uses. All right. So that's the file extension that's traditionally used, GoHTML. And you could use whatever you like, but that's the customary one to use. So what we'll do is we will parse this file, and then we'll be able to use that file, and we can execute it, and we can execute it to some location, right? This takes a writer interface. It takes a typewriter. So that's what we do. So to understand how we parse files and bring them into our program, it's good for us to go look at the text template package from the standard library. And I want to go down to the index, and I want to explore that. So if we go to the index, we can see here at the index for text template, we have a type template, and type template has, I can't zoom in on this. That's disappointing to me. I wish I could zoom in. Type template has parse files and parse glob, and then also new and must, and I'll explain what these do here. And then when we parse files, we get a pointer to a template. If we parse a glob, we get a pointer to a template. If we use new, we get a pointer to a template. If we use must, we get a pointer to a template. So if we use any of these functions, we get a pointer to a template. And this is type template. And if we have a pointer to a template, we have all of these methods available to us, right? All these different methods are attached to any value, which is of type a pointer to a template. So some of those methods are parse files, and parse glob. Interesting, right? So we have parse files and parse glob down here, and parse files and parse glob up here. So the way I want you to think of a pointer to a template, it's a container into which all of your templates get parsed and are held. So pointer to a template is a container. This is just Todd's definition of it. is a container into which all of the templates get parsed and are held. So let me show you how this works, and then we'll come back to the standard library to make sure we understand the functionality. So when we read our code, we're reading this dot notation is package, and then function or type, right, is the next thing. So from package template, we're going to use parse files, and this is from text template. Be careful when you use your autocomplete. If it says HTML template, you're using a different package, and that's going to give you different results. So if your code is looking different, it might be because you have HTML template instead text template. We're just going to start out with text template at first, and then we will move up to HTML template after we understand how text template is working. So from package template, I parse files. I give it the file name, right? And if I look at what parse files does, parse files is a variadic parameter where it takes 0 or more strings, right? So if I wanted to, I could pass in as many file names here as I wanted. So I could do, tpl2.go.html if I had it. So I could just keep passing file names in there. And so it's going to parse those, and then it's going to store them. Parse files gives me back a pointer to a template and an error. So I check my error, and I have my pointer to a template. And remember, the way I want you to think about a pointer to a template is a container which is holding all of the templates which I have parsed. Okay, container holding all the templates which I have parsed. So then I could say template execute, and execute wants to execute. It takes a writer and data. Okay, and so I'm executing to OS standard out, which implements the writer interface, and I am passing in no data. All right, so this is going to execute to standard out. Let's just watch it run because that will help you see what's happening. Change 00401 go run main.go. So there it parsed that template, right? And then I executed my template to standard out, and I was able to see that. Pretty cool. Additionally, if I wanted to, we're just parsing one file here. I could also, right, parse my files, get my pointer to a template, which is a container holding all the files I've parsed. In this case, I've only parsed one. And I could create a new file, and then I could execute my template, and I could pass the new file in there, because a new file, template execute, template execute requests a writer, right? And it also takes data, and we're not passing in any data, so I'm doing nil. But since a file implements the writer interface, I can now pass a new file in there, and template execute will write the results to this new file, index.html. And so go into that directory, go run main.go, and it ran, and then I'll see index.html right there, and it put it all in index.html. So the two steps here are parse your files and then execute your files. And if we look at the standard library, we can see that once we parse files, we get a pointer to a template, and when we have a pointer to a template, we have execute. Okay? So that method execute is right there, attached to the pointer to template. We get a value of type pointer to template. It now has the method execute attached to it, which we could do. Execute takes a writer and data, and here we're doing a new file to write to. So that's using parse files. And here we're doing parse files, template parse files, and we're just parsing one file. But then down here we do TPL parse files. So when I get a value of type template, pointer to a template, right? That's a container which holds all of the templates I've parsed. Okay? And if I then later decide, hey, I want to add some more templates into that container, well, here's my container. It's of type pointer to a template. And if I go look at the standard library, I have type pointer to a template, has all these methods. One of the methods is parse files, right? So now that I have a value, which is my TPL of type pointer to a template, I have a method attached to it, parse files, which allows me to add more files into my value of type pointer to a template, which I've told you to think about as a container holding your templates. And so here I parse one file, and then I execute that one file to standard out, and then I parse two more files into my value of type pointer to a template, my container which holds all of my templates. And now instead of just execute, I'm going to specify execute template. So down here in this library, right, we have both execute, which takes a writer and data, or we have execute template, which takes a writer, a name, and data. And so execute template allows me to execute a specific template. So if my container, which holds all of my templates, this TPL variable, right, if it only has one template, I could just say template execute. But if it has more than one template, I want to specify which template, so I use execute template. And I say to standard out, execute this template, execute this template, execute that template. And so if I run that, and I'm in 03, right, I get 1, Vespa, 2, 1, 1. So 1, Vespa, 2, 1. And then down here, I ran execute again. And execute just executes whatever's the first one it finds in the container. So it found 1 first, maybe because that's the first one I put in. So generally speaking, and what we're going to use in this course is we're always going to use execute template just so that we can be specific about which template we are executing. And instead of using parse files, which you have to list all of your files that you want to parse in, we are going to use parse glob. Because in the standard library, we could parse files and we could give all the file names, or we could parse glob. So if you've done any Unix stuff, you know glob is just like a big, basically what it sounds, glob of stuff, right? And so a glob here is a folder. And we're going to do template parse glob, and we're going to look in this folder, and we're going to parse any file that has this extension, GMAO. Alternatively, I could just say, give me all of the files in that folder, right? And so I gave it GMAO just to show you that we could call it anything, but just to be compliant with the standards, you know, not the standards, but the customary ways of programming. I'm going to call this Go HTML to adhere to the customs. All right, Go HTML. And then I'll change all these to Go HTML. Go HTML. There we go. So I'm going to parse the glob, and it's going to parse all of my templates in this folder. I've got 1, I've got 2, I've got Vespa, just so you could see that they could be called anything. And then I'm going to execute, see which one comes out just out of curiosity, and then I'm going to use execute template to execute specifically a certain template. And so that's a 04. And I have 1 Vespa 2 1. So 1 was the first one that got executed. Maybe it does it alphabetically, I don't know. And then we have Vespa 2 1. Then those are specifically, you know, which ones. So one last thing we could do with our templates to make sure that our program is performant is we want to make sure that we parse all of our templates only once. And again, I'm just going to change these to GMAO or to Go HTML. There we go. And I'm just going to say do everything in that folder, and then I need to update each of these. Cool. And so now to make this performant, I only want to parse my templates once. So I'm going to use func-init, which initializes my program. It runs once when the program is starting up. And so when my program starts up, I'm going to parse this whole glob, right? And I'm going to store that in my TPL variable, which is of type pointer to template from package template. Well, what's this template must function doing right there? So if we again go back and look at the standard library, the documentation for package text template, we see that when we parse glob, we get back a pointer to a template and an error, right? And here, must takes a pointer to a template and an error and returns just a template, right? So must is going to do my error checking for me. If I go and I look at must, I see that must, right, does my error checking, and then returns the template. So I could use must to avoid doing my error checking. So I could use parse glob. It gives me a pointer to a template and an error. Parse glob gives me a pointer to a template and an error, right? That gives me a pointer to a template and an error right there. And must takes a pointer to a template and an error. So what parse glob returns is exactly what must takes. So parse glob runs, returns a pointer to a template and an error. Must now has a pointer to a template and an error, and it returns a template, which I assign right there. And I put this up here at this level, so it's at package level, the scope. That way TPL is accessible throughout this package. And then I execute my templates. So exactly the same thing, same output, but let's just see it run. And same stuff. So that's how we work with templates in Go, right? That's text template. And the two main steps you want to do is you want to parse glob. So get all of your templates and store them into a variable of type pointer to a template. And you could think of that variable, right? That's this TPL right here. And you could call that whatever you want. That's just an identifier. You could think of that variable as a container holding all of the templates which you've parsed. And then you could execute those templates. So execute to this writer, this template, and I'm not passing in data. All right, so I hope that's clear. And what we're going to use in this course is we're going to use this structure right here, right, where we're parsing glob, and then we're going to use execute template. But I just want to make sure you saw the standard library and how those different pieces work together. Cool, we're on our way.